All right. This is the closest I'm going to get to an official, that's it, we're done, Black Sabbath rap party. Everything Black Sabbath, okay? So here's my Sabbath collection, which this is basically like part 3 to the Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi 7th Star. The last of my Black Sabbath albums. This is the entire set remastered. The only ones in here that are not remastered are 13, because this is the original release when it came out. Oh, sorry. Reunion is not remastered because this is the original one when it came out. 13 is not remastered because this is the original one from when it came out. And Heaven and Hell, oh, I can never remember the name of the album. The Devil You Know is the original. No, it's not the original. Yeah, it is. It's the original, because I don't think they've released a remaster version of it. These are the 2 NIB Black Sabbath albums, the tribute albums. Black Sabbath Live Evil, the Deluxe Super Edition box set, which only reason I bought is I found it for a really good, clean the dust off. I found it for a really good price online. Gave the evil guy with the penis-shaped blue rockets money. Anno Domini, this is the entire Tony Martin years. All right. So that's what we got going. So we got Ozzy, we got Dio, we got Gillian, we got Glenn Hughes, Tony Martin, 4 different vocalists. Tony Martin, not including live albums. Tony Martin and Dio have the same number of albums. Ozzy has not more than all of them put together. Well, maybe he does. Hold on. Okay, not including the live reunion album. Ozzy has 9. Okay, so albums without Ozzy outnumber Ozzy by 1. So you take all the vocalists collectively, and it only works because of the Glenn Hughes 7th Star edition. Without 7th Star, it would be completely balanced between Ozzy and everybody else. So Ozzy clearly is always going to more or less basically be the favorite vocalist. Dio, when it came to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, Dio really got screwed. Dio should have been inducted in there, especially because of how late Sabbath was inducted in afterwards. Because it took quite a while after they were eligible before they actually got in. Because of that, Dio should have went in with them. And I do believe that Tony Martin's got the same number of albums as Dio does, so Tony Martin should have got in as well. But if you're putting Tony Martin in, that means you absolutely would have had to put in Glenn Hughes and put in Ian Gillian as well, because they were both in Black Sabbath technically before Tony Martin was. So it makes for a real giant mess. And I really do believe, if you've already seen my rant at this point, about Tony Martin getting screwed with even these reissues, Tony Martin gets screwed, you know? Headless Cross the Headless Cross tour really should have been included in here. I'm positive there was a DVD for the Headless Cross tour. I'm positive. When I worked at the Evil Corporation, I'm positive I saw it, and I'm ashamed that I never picked it up. And the reason I didn't pick it up was specifically because it was Tony Martin. It wasn't even Ronnie James Dio. I saw it over and over. I'm like, who's this guy? I don't even know who this guy is. And that's my fault as well, because I had access to cassette and vinyl through my stepmom and never got exposed to it. Now, the vinyl I couldn't be, she didn't have a needle for her turntable at the time. And I didn't have a quality turntable to make it worth borrowing my stepmom's vinyl to listen to. I don't remember which album it would have. I think it might have been Tear. But I don't remember if it was Tear or if I'm thinking of the Dio albums. She had on vinyl, and on cassette, she definitely, I'm positive, had a Headless Cross. But I'm picturing she had Tear on cassette as well, so she might not have had that. Or maybe she had it on both cassette and vinyl. Maybe she liked them that much at the time. I don't know. But I never listened to it because both my stepmom and my dad both were very much only real Sabbath was with Ozzy kind of thing. So even though my stepmom, I swear, had every Sabbath album up until, we'll say, like 87, 88, except for she didn't have Seventh Star. I know she didn't have that, but she at least had a couple of the Tony Martin albums on top of the Dio albums, on top of the Ozzy albums, right? But she didn't have Dehumanizer, which is when Dio came back. So I had exposure at least to most Sabbath albums. I should have had exposure to most Sabbath albums up until Dehumanizer, but just because of weird biases and my own personal being young and, just listening to the adults, never went and listened to what I had access on my own. So I couldn't form that opinion. And I would have been hearing it on cassette. So, that's a thing on its own too, right? You get that lovely hiss. Although weirdly, cassette's making a comeback, man. Apparently Gen Z, or the young Gen Z and the late Gen Alphas or something like that, they want cassettes. They want their Walkmans. Can't blame them. There was something cool about Walkmans. This is why I used to do a mixtape episode. Should go back and do those, maybe. What do you think? Should I go back to doing my mixtape things since tapes seem to be coming back? Oh, let me know down below. Okay. While I'm going for it here with the Sabbath, there's a couple points I really want to get to with this. One, don't let other people's biases stop you from picking up albums or getting into albums, all right? Don't be afraid to buy albums just to check them out. Sometimes you're going to get a good album, sometimes you're going to get a dud. Not every Black Sabbath album is a winner. Like, for example, when it comes to the Tony Martin era, Forbidden had one of the worst reviews, etc., when it first was released. And it was released in, 95? Yeah, it was released in 95. And when you look at everything else that was being released in 95, Forbidden, when I go by the version in here, in the remastered sets, was actually a pretty good album compared to a lot of the other metal being released in 95. But the original release of it was panned and basically, I hate to say this, but crucified. And it really shouldn't have been. There's some choice stuff in here, but I do really believe that the record label at the end of the day is the villain in this whole entire story that we're telling right now. Record labels are always the villain. Black Sabbath was originally supposed to end after the Mob Rules album. When Born Again came out with Dio and Gillian, it was not supposed to be Black Sabbath. It was supposed to be a separate brand new band that was going to go off and start and do its own thing. And the record label insisted it be Black Sabbath. And then there was issues with the production, and then there was issues with this, and then there was issues with that, and the album basically more or less was sabotaged. So, and then, okay, now, if you've ever watched Spinal Tap, you know the joke about the Stonehenge, where it's supposed to be 6 meters, and they make it like 6 inches or something like that in the movie. Okay, or it's supposed to be 16 feet, and they make it 16 inches. I think if that's what it is. So they have to get the little people to dance around it. Okay. So that is a joke based off of what actually happened during the Born Again tour, because during the Born Again tour, it was supposed to be X number of feet. There was a screw up between feet and meters. And when you screw up 18 feet and 18 meters, they couldn't even use the prop in most of the theaters. Sorry, I need a drink. So, if the record label had let them release it under a new band name at that time, there's a high possibility, I think, Born Again, and had not screwed the production, I think there's a good possibility that Born Again could have been a much better album than it was. If and then Iommi at that point, things may have gone better, and Ian may not have felt the need to say screw this and go back to Deep Purple, because Ian gets stuck having to do Black Sabbath songs, And, nothing wrong with doing Black Sabbath songs, but you want to do your own stuff, right? So he'd rather be out on tour doing his own stuff, right? Instead of touring his entire album, he's out there doing a couple songs off his album and touring Black Sabbath stuff. And then the next album to that being Seventh Star. And with that same problem again, it should have been a not Black Sabbath album. Forced to be a Black Sabbath album. Go out on tour, screws things up, vocalist screws off and leaves. Goes back to Deep Purple. Joke. I don't believe Glenn Hughes went to Deep Purple at that point. Would be funny though. And then you get into the Tony Martin stuff where Iommi's like, okay, well, if I'm going to be stuck doing Black Sabbath, I guess I'm going to do Black Sabbath. And there is definitely a little more Black Sabbath by numbers, it feels like, in there. But because of how much had already been released under the Black Sabbath title before it, it never really stood a chance. It never really was given the opportunity to live and breathe, because Black Sabbath always has a very kind of, a Black Sabbath kind of sound. And if it doesn't sound like a Black Sabbath album, people say it doesn't sound like, okay, so, and the reason why I mention this is up until 95, Black Sabbath was releasing pretty close to on par with Alice Cooper. Okay. And Alice Cooper definitely diversified musically a lot more, theoretically to the detriment of Alice Cooper's popularity even. Because Alice definitely in the early 80s was not anywhere near as popular as Black Sabbath was. But when you get into the mid 80s going into the 90s, Alice definitely way overtook Black Sabbath. And I think a lot of that was adapting and adding new stuff and having new musicians. And Iommi is always going to sound like Iommi, and Iommi is always going to write the most amazing riffs. The problem is sometimes Iommi riffs are what Lars would refer to as stock riffs, meaning that they're just a basic Iommi riff. They don't have that pizzazz, they don't have that flash, they don't have that vibe. They just sound like a rehash of something he's done before. But when you look at the number of albums before, that's going to happen. This is why I'm a big supporter of bands busting up and artists going solo and forming new groups and putting super groups together and stuff like that, even if it's only for an album or two, because you get incredible new music out of it. But when you have the same artists doing the same thing over and over and over again, it's going to get stagnant. It's going to get stale. As much as I so heavily mourn such an early loss of Pete Steele back in the mid 2000s, I believe the gentleman's been gone for about 20 years at this point. As much as I mourn that, well, maybe not quite that long, but I think that if Typo Negative had been releasing albums this entire time, there's a high possibility they may have gone very stagnant, because I was worried about that for a while, like, because they were starting to go stagnant after just like a couple albums, I thought. Well, after about 3 albums, World Coming Down felt so stagnant to me. There's other, even with more modern artists, like there's certain points where it kind of gets to a point of stagnation. Like Halloween, weirdly, has growth throughout all their albums. Like there's definitely different eras, different periods. They had different vocalists though, so that makes a difference in there, right? There's a band worth checking out live, man. When I saw them live with all their vocalists, that was really cool. And getting back to Black Sabbath, changing out the bassists, changing out the drummers, changing out the vocalists would have worked in a lot of these cases if they hadn't remained under the moniker Black Sabbath. I really think that if Seven Star had been released under Iommi, or had been given a different name, even completely different name that incorporated that was a new band, it might have stood a chance. It really might have, as a supergroup kind of thing, or a sort of a supergroup. Because it did not sound like Sabbath. It sounded as production. I think the same thing with Born Again. I think Born Again 83, if I remember correctly, so it would have been competing with like Come On, Feel the Noise, early Motley Crue, stuff like that. It had the potential to compete with that if the production had matched the way it sounded on the reissue. Totally should have been able to compete with that. But not under the moniker of Black Sabbath, I don't think. And the Tony Martin stuff, like that's the Iommi by numbers that I'm talking about. I do believe the further you get away from Ozzy, the less great cuts you get, because that was the beauty of most of the Ozzy years. Like the first 4 albums, there's no bad songs. Like there's album cuts, but there's no bad songs. And after that, you get a couple that are a little bit here and there. I think the Sabotage album was a highly underrated masterpiece myself, to the point where I think the Sabotage album is actually my favorite Black Sabbath album now. And for the longest time, I said that it was Masters of Reality, and I'm Sabotage after the reissues with the remasters. I've switched. I really have. I'm trying to not cough. I think that with the Dio albums, I would kind of go actually mix and match picking songs out of Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell to put together one really super amazing album. But the two albums on their own are fantastic. Dehumanizer's garbage. I can't in any way justify Dehumanizer. And it's really weird, okay? I don't like giving out, these product pushes or anything like that, but I have a Samsung TV, so I get the Samsung TV stations thing. And they've got, I think it's Vivo Rock and Metal, I think is the one. I think it's Vivo or X Music or something like that. I can never remember which channel it is. It's either Vivo or X Music or something like that. And they play music videos all day long, sort of. It's the closest I get to a music video station. And they really got a thing for playing Dehumanizer era Sabbath. They really have a thing for Dio era Sabbath, but really specifically Dehumanizer, man. Cannot get over how many times I've seen the video for TV Crimes. And that was a song I was never fond of. And that's just because I'm not into the lyrical content. And then with Tony Martin, Headless Cross was a bloody amazing album. Bloody amazing album. So, and by Sabbath standards, it's a really good album. So, I really do think that Tony Martin's gotten screwed badly with all these reissues and that. Maybe Mr. Iommi, I know you're probably never going to see this, but I'm asking really nicely. For the next record store day, at least the next one in April of 2027, can you please do a Tony Martin live album? A double live of Tony Martin would be great. Make sure it gets released on compact disc. Because I have so much live material for Black Sabbath with Dio, with Ian, with Ray. But I have nothing for Tony. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up here because this journey through Black Sabbath has been something really. I really wish I would have done as it was actually going on as a kid. I really do think that allowing biases as a kid to detract from me picking up these albums when they were originally coming out, when I was originally finding them. Like Seven Star sat in the local record store I mentioned from time to time, Dr. Disc, one of three. I'm going to do a special on all those record stores in Windsor. Do you want to see a special about all the record stores in Windsor? Let me know down below. We've got one major and then I've got quite a few independents. So if you want to know about Windsor record stores, let me know and I'll go take a tour of all the stores. So where I'm going with this is if I had Seven Star, I could have bought it at Dr. Disc, which is the local record store I'm talking about, for a decade. I swear to God, it sat in the Black Sabbath section for like a decade that no one bothered to pick it up, which is why I didn't think it was going to move that fast this time around. And do I regret not buying it then? No, because if I had bought it then, I don't know if I would have bought the remaster or not, just to get the live stuff. I might have, because the sound quality would have been better. And the sound quality is really good on it. You can really hear that they did fix that up in the mix and whatnot. And I did replace every other album I had bought that was originally not remastered. So, it's a possibility. But I really wish I would have discovered this album sooner. I wish I would have gotten into Headless Cross sooner. Oh my God. I I would have changed people's mind on Hellas Cross when I was in high school and really gotten people to look outside of the Ozzy years. I really would have. Man, that's a great, great album. I would have hated Dehumanizer. Would have hated it. Should have owned Heaven and Hell. I really should have, man. Heaven and Hell was fantastic. I should have owned Bob Rolls. It's fantastic. So, don't let biases stop you from picking up albums. Don't let other people's opinions stop you from exploring music. Get out there, love music for the sake of loving music. Get out there, explore Black Sabbath. Explore everything, man. Just absorb it all. Don't buy every album under the sun. You don't need to. That's what I'm here for. And even I don't buy all these albums. A lot of these albums are given to me. Not by Black Sabbath. I bought all my Black Sabbath. And if I didn't buy it, Tracy bought it. But that's not the point. All right, folks. I have gone on way too long. This whole Black Sabbath thing, I can't believe is going to end up running in total, probably over an hour covering all of this between my rants and whatnot. Let me know anything down below in the comment section. That is what that is for. On your way down there, like button, subscribe button, bell for notifications. Couple links worth checking out. Peace, love, take care.